Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Friday. I am Kyler Cheatham, honored to be your host today of the Confidential Live. This is an opportunity for us to talk about what's going on in our real client work or real business when it comes to transformations around technology and kind of what is going on as opposed to hype that we see in the headlines. So if you've never been here before, definitely welcome. It's a very fluid, informal, um, interactive session. So I invite you to join the conversation in wherever platform you're joining from. We're live on a variety of different platforms today. And as always, I am joined by my co-host here, Adam Cheatham, who we grill with questions that he has no idea what's coming down the pipeline. This one, I think, especially. So definitely kind of join in there. I'll give you a brief overview of our topic, and then I'll turn it over to him to kind of do a little bit of an intro. But today we're doing something a little bit different. I've been doing a lot of work in our community here in rural Colorado and for the state of Colorado in judging OEDIT grants, and then also being involved in the Western Economic Forum. And we're going to share some shifting we're seeing just with kind of the tech gold rush and where we're seeing kind of the move from money being spent in certain areas of technology investments into others, specifically in talking about advanced industries. So with that, Adam, good morning. Can you give us just a quick little intro about what you do here, who you are, what you're looking forward to for the weekend, maybe?
So my name is Adam Sheehan, I'm the CEO of The Confidential. I focus on helping companies integrate technology with their business, whether it's people, process, or strategy. So we focus on those confluences as they add value, and that's what we're hoping to always do for our clients and for our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of just to give you a quick overview, of what I've been seeing. So the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade, they have advanced industry grants for early seed businesses. And me, along with colleagues, review these types of things. And then also in conjunction with that, our team was featured on the aerospace and defense, specifically the AI panel for the Western Colorado Economic Summit. And so kind of talking about a lot of our home state, but I think the shifting that we're seeing in the marketplace around technology, talent, right, and just overall understanding of what people are buying, why, I think it's a common theme that's happening at least domestically here in the United States so far. So when we take a look at, talent around IT and technology, that's always a big conversation about how should you do it right and how should you make sure that you have the internal competencies, especially with the specificity we're seeing of systems emerging in the marketplace. So when we buy a core system like SAP, IFS, anything like that, it's important that we have those internal competencies in-house to manage those. A lot of times when we have in-office settings, right, it's difficult for us to be able to attract that talent, especially with the investment in more rural America tech, right? We have the space, we have the cost of living, we have the housing that people need to be able to move there. I'm wondering, Adam, what you've seen or what just your thoughts are on balancing that need for IT specific talent and in-house work and the pros and cons around that.
So you're talking about outsourcing IT talent versus insourcing, yeah?
I'm talking about picking the best talent for you, right? And your workforce. Say you're in, a situation where, you're having everyone kind of return back to the office. Does that limit your talent pool? I would say most definitely. But how do you manage a remote systems department, right? Where they're supposed to be seeing all of it and they're not actually in the building. So there's pros and cons to
Yeah.
both of those, right?
Well, I think that some of what you talk about is the thought process of what happens when all of my stuff goes into the cloud, right? And for sensitive industries like aerospace and defense, there's a lot of questions about access. and accessibility. Like, what happens if the internet goes down? Can I run my shop floor if we don't have connectivity? Those types of things. And then there are the conversations on having a secure cloud in general. So there are a number of different pieces of that that go to the conversation of infrastructure as part of the conversation. If you're going to have people who are remote, you certainly need to be able to secure the pipelines that they're going to be using to access things. And when you're really accessing highly secure information, it makes a ton of sense to me, at least, to have that on premise and
Mhm.
have that be something that is internal, so that's behind your firewall, and instead of having to set up VPN tunnels and stuff like that, so that people can get into it. All of those access points are risk points. So I think that from a perspective of, um, the if you want to talk about, well, should we be an on-site workforce, this, that, and the other, that's a question for every individual company.
Mhm.
I am a firm believer in face-to-face interactions.
Mhm.
Even though we do most of our work remotely, we place an emphasis on seeing our clients face to face and building a
Mhm.
relationship with them. I think that there's a whole lot more to that. And you can just look at the internet today and see how people treat each other from a perspective of behind the keyboard, and some of the things that are said that I'm pretty sure most of those people wouldn't say in person to somebody's face when they actually have to deal with the fallout of the conversation. You apply that in a professional setting. There are a number of different reasons, I think, to at least have face-to-face relationships. I'm not certainly not saying that, well, everybody should go back to work and that's just the way that,
Yeah.
back to the office. But at the same time, we had to remember that there are things that are said and done between the silent spaces that people share together, right? And the internet is too great a distance to get that kind of connection to the individuals who really have to do in spaces like aerospace and defense really highly complex work.
Mhm.
The we just talked a lot about the Artemis mission, right?
Mhm.
How much of that can you really do if you don't have a group of people in a room together, really thinking about hard problems together?
Mhm.
And how
Yeah.
fast does that develop? How much more quickly does it develop when people are together?
Most definitely. And I think we see, and I saw this at the Women in Manufacturing Summit a lot, because a lot of times when we look at manufacturing plants, right, they're not in the middle of Seattle or New York City or Denver or anything like that, because they need the amount of space, right? They're typically in more of a rural environment. And we see kind of this challenge with just operators, the operator tier of it used to be something that maybe 20 years ago was a skill set that a lot of people are moving into. And we see, like my colleagues at the University of Georgia, putting together an innovation plant that's just teaches manufacturing skills within this new kind of operator AI environment, whether you're working with robotics or anything like that. Also, a lot of our aerospace and defense here in rural Colorado do that with our partners over at Colorado Mesa University Tech, right? And so what are your thoughts on kind of that operator talent challenge in rural America?
So I think you can, for all intents and purposes, the right people will, seeing the right people and finding a way to do that, especially at a school when people are expecting to be more mobile is fine. Certainly being in more concentrated areas where you have a bigger talent pool or a bigger university draw, those types of things help support that. But at the end of the day, if you want somebody, go get them, right?
Mhm.
It's not uncommon for somebody to graduate from one school and then go work someplace else out in a totally different state on a totally different side of the country, right? So I'm not super worried about it necessarily must come from the local community, but you certainly don't do yourselves any favors if you don't try to bolster your local community to be able to support that draw. Because at the end of the day, you do have to have a scenario where if somebody wants to come to work for your company and the area around it doesn't have a
Mhm.
character or a draw that attracts talent, then you're gonna really struggle with that.
Absolutely. And that was, that was a big conversation we had on the aerospace and defense side, because many of those, like you already mentioned, have to be in person, right? We see
Yep.
that with a variety of just security needs, right?
Yeah.
For them to be there, and the compliance, right? It's not just the company that needs to be secure. They need to be secure for all of the different, compliance to be able to do any business with the DoD, Department of Defense in general, right? They have to now be at level 3, as opposed to
It's
level
not
1.
the defense anymore, though, is it?
I don't know. I'm sorry. That it's still from an industry perspective, the
Yeah.
Department of Defense, right? So a lot of that is kind of misunderstood. And I think the thing we were talking about a lot of times, and our colleagues do this too, is, how do we compete with a market like Dallas? Right. And we have to remember like where those funds are going. Right. So if you're looking at a higher salary, right? As I always say, typically, right, when we're looking like a 25 to 35-year-old employee, they're not going to just take a lower salary out of the goodness of their heart, right? Like they don't have things like additional assets or anything like that. Would they like a lifestyle balance in rural America? Maybe, right? But then we think about like the longevity of a state like Texas that's investing over 500 million into their aerospace and defense infrastructure, but they don't have things like data centers for power, and their power grid can't handle those types of things. So a lot of times we have to look at like where that investment is going and for what different structure it's being able to be competitive,
Mhm.
right? Or it might pull a lot of jobs to Dallas or Houston or wherever in the short term, but will those be sustainable in the long term is really the question.
Well, that depends on the longevity of the companies. There's so much involved in that question,
Mhm.
right? So Dallas obviously has its own structure and its own um, foundation that supports a lot of different businesses. But if you're talking about growing a rural area, every individual company makes a bigger difference as it becomes a bigger fish in a smaller pool, if you
Mhm.
will. So those, as you're looking to establish new business and new markets in smaller areas, those things make a bigger difference to the
Mhm.
people there, and they're a bigger draw for local talent. So use mining in Minnesota, for example.
Mhm.
Mining client up there who, what do we do when we need local folks?
Mhm.
There's a long, long history of mining in Minnesota, and some of those mines that have been dormant for quite some time. Some of that skill set is aged and maybe left, right? So how new is that, and what are we going to do with the technology? And then what do you do when you start to say, well, we're not really, in that scenario, they struggle with the idea of what do you do when you tell them we're going to bring a significant technology contingency that's actually going to automate a lot of the more traditional roles. So those folks who have those skill sets from days gone by aren't actually candidates unless they
Mhm.
learn new skills as well, which
Mhm.
means that you got to have some type of a way of training a local
Mhm.
population or bringing in outside talent.
Let's pick up on that a little bit. So, another huge theme we see throughout the technology industry across the globe is this automation to cut headcount. And that's been a conversation around what does that look like, and many big marquee examples of that, in the last couple of months, just in 2026, right? That we've seen over 30,000 jobs in the last year for technology be completely eliminated. I struggle with that term because were they offshore? We don't really know, right? But they were eliminated in the name of AI. So when a business comes to you and says, hey, we're going to get this new system in order to cut headcount, what are some key questions that you're asking them to be sure that, like, are you actually able to do that?
Well, the decision to bring in a system and the decision to cut headcount should be separated, in my opinion. It's if you're going to implement a new system and cut headcount at the same time, who the hell is going to implement it? Right? So what are we
The
doing?
robots.
Well, and who's going to implement those? Right? Like at some point, you need people to start the process. So if you fire all of them before you get started, then you got nothing to stand it up on, right? So let's talk about that piece of it first. We're going to create this new technology to eliminate headcount. My next question would be: are you really not running that lean? Are you really running that unlean? Right? Do you have that? Have you really been carrying that type of headcount that installing a new software program would actually lead you to significant reductions? Because most of the time, buying software for the sake of cutting headcount the math doesn't check out on that. You pay more in the software than you will in the headcount. So you don't really save money by doing that. And then you start thinking about, okay, so if we got to do this in reality, the way that this would play out becomes all right, so we're going to dedicate a team to implementing this new technology. And then once we have that new technology implemented, we're going to reduce headcount. Okay, so where do these savings come from? Well, this person's going to save 4 hours a week. That person's going to save 4 hours a week. This person's going to save 10, whatever. Okay, so which one of them are you firing? You can't fire fractions of people. I go after this a little bit facetiously in that the purpose of implementing new applications is not typically to cut headcount, unless you are a technology company who can use AI to automate a significant degree of work. What usually happens is you say, now those people can do more. And it's not about cutting headcount, it's about increasing productivity. And then when you increase productivity enough, you find your spaces where you might be able to get a bit leaner. And that takes a long time for that cycle to come together, right? You got to figure out who's becoming more productive and embracing this system and who is not. And that person that's becoming more productive needs to be able to take on more to be able to accommodate the change of roles. So it's not we're going to implement, we're going to go live, and then the next day we're going to cut headcount by 10%. It's just simply isn't that way.
Absolutely. And so I guess what would you say? And I'll use some audience questions to kind of formulate this my question. This from the audience feels like a lot of AI driven reductions are assumptions on top of systems that haven't fundamentally changed how the work is getting done. So, right, what would you say to the fear and resistance that people, especially in rural communities, right, feel when AI and automation is brought into the conversation?
Well, I would simply say, how did people feel about the internet getting into rural communities, and what does that look like now? Right, smartphones and all that stuff replacing all of these functions. At the end of the day, the technology trend is unstoppable. It is coming, right? Maybe urban centers will adopt it more quickly, but at the end of the day, we got to be able to figure out how to use these tools effectively. Now, AI-driven reductions are an interesting thought process in that I think that there's probably more of they're going to reduce the number of new jobs that come up as opposed to cut actual jobs. And we'll take the mining client, the same example. They are going to automate all of their mining equipment. all of their dump trucks, all of their diggers, all of those things are going to be driven by an automated AI. Those jobs never existed in the first place, right? So it's not like they are commissioning a new mine under this model. So there's no transition to be had there. Those jobs didn't exist and they're not going to. So it's not a reduction per se. There is a little bit of a well, what about meism in it? Not in my backyard type of thing. But at the end of the day, how can you lose something that you never had in the first place? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a little bit of this that is more of a and what I would suggest to be fair and honest is that people start looking at their at unique opportunities, right?
Mm-hmm.
AI is accelerating the rate at which people can do things like start new businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're worried about that, find a passion, start a business, right? This
Yeah.
is cool stuff. And you could I mean in the span of less than a day, you can sit down with an AI tool. You can talk through an idea with it, have a several hours long conversation, if you will, and come up with a business case, a business plan, and a business idea that tells you how to execute it. You could do that today, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at all of these things. What are the farmers going to do when the motorized vehicles come to town, right? Like, well, they're going to use them to plow the fields, right? This is what tractors are. But nobody knew what a tractor was at that point in time. They
Mm-hmm.
didn't exist. We had motorized vehicles and we had uh, horses and oxen pulling plows and stuff like that, right? So the technology that will become more useful in rural areas will certainly be different than it is today because it'll be invented by people in those
Mm-hmm.
areas, right? And
I
so go
mean,
out and do it.
hopefully.
Yeah. Well, they're
Right.
the ones that understand it, right? You can't take somebody from the city and say, "I know how to design something that's going to help rural Colorado run their agriculture." Like, why? Because you've actually been a part of it, maybe moved to the city, yeah, possibly, but more likely than not, it's the folks that are understanding how it can bring value to those rural areas and getting in front of it because it will come the same way the internet came and the same way the smartphone came to rural areas. It's taken time for folks to get rid of the landlines, right? And there are still folks in rural areas that have them, but that doesn't mean that. The technology stops when we go from urban to suburban and there's some barrier. It will continue to grow. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity in that space.
I mean, and to a point, I agree with you. I think there is a lot, especially not only in the state of Colorado, but just coming out of San Francisco and things like that, because they see the ag tech, right, as an area that's
Mhm.
growing in profitability for investors, right? So investors are pushing the ag tech, they're innovating, but they can't, speak farmer, right?
I'm
They
just loving this conversation in the chat, by the way. This unfolding force. AI it can execute some things for you, but it can't do all of the thinking, right? It won't. An AI can't own a business. An AI can't do all of it, but it certainly can workflow and automate things for sure.
I mean, as long as you monitor it. But back to my excellent point that you interrupted. But there's a lots of investor pieces that are I think I've seen the biggest piece of, like, there's this great innovation, the tech is there. I don't really care that much about that. I want to know if you can implement it or you've executed it in some sort of business. And also that it integrates with additional pieces that are going to be within legacy farms and things like that. Have you gone out to ask the customer, the user, right, what they need from their technology? We see the same thing on more of, a macro level with the bigger enterprises we work with, of like, have you asked the end user what they need and what they're wanting. So I think there's a level at which we're seeing a lot of innovation because there's a lot of money and capital around that. Will the innovation work? I think is a whole nother big question mark that we won't see. I mean, the ones that know their customers, like we see, if you follow me on any platform, I'm, a huge John Deere fan when it comes to just ag tech innovation. Well, we can't have, self-driving tractors if we don't have the connectivity to be able to manage them or the processes to be able to move the product effectively. And that's a huge piece about execution just in general. We see that not only on like what businesses are starting, who's getting capital, who's getting investments, but we see that on the level of, people coming to us all the time wanting to buy AI with no for what? Like what would you like to do? And there's not, a business problem or there's no execution understanding in there. There's just pressure from leadership to somehow use AI better than they already are.
Well, again, it has to be bound in some type of a goal and a purpose, right? Why are we using this tool? You could use it for all kinds of things, but if you're just using it to ask the internet questions about the meaning of life, then you're not going to get much out of your business model with it, right? You might get some interesting answers, but at the end of the day, it has to serve a purpose, at least in a direction, right? Most of this stuff that is directionless isn't going to go anywhere. Now, that doesn't mean that you seek out one direction and end up with something different. There's the moniker that the plan goes to waste as soon as action starts, right? No battle plan survives first contact with the enemy, but at the same time, it's the act of planning that is the key point of it. I'm less worried about actually accomplishing the exact thought processes than I am about accomplishing something positive. Yeah. Now, you certainly have unintended consequences that you got to prepare for. Obviously, I haven't seen Terminator 2 type of thought process. And you certainly have accountabilities to folks that say, this is how much we're going to spend to accomplish this goal and this task, right? From a business perspective, you do have to have some rigor behind it. But if we're tinkering and we're inventing, that's a different type of research and development than the purposeful integration of technology that you really got to get after. So when you're trying to bring in a new software tool, it should have a purpose. You should know what you expect from it, and then you should seek to accomplish that. Especially if you're buying it. If you're creating it, give yourself some innovative space, right? But if you are really going after it to purchase it and buy it, you better have some good reasons for why it is you're going to do that, what your goals are. I want to go back to something about the headcount conversation because
Okay.
there are a couple of bits and pieces of this that I think are worth talking about as far as headcount reductions are concerned.
Okay.
The first is that look at the types of companies that are actually cutting headcount
Mhm.
and that are explicitly saying that they are replacing it with AI. Who are we talking about here? What are the
Mhm.
names of these companies? Oracle, Meta. They're all technology companies. Their product is technology, and that's what their specialty is. So you're not seeing manufacturing companies say AI is going to run our shop floor. That's not what's happening, right? You do have robots that are now running warehouses for Amazon. But what do you
Mhm.
think Amazon thinks of themselves? What type of company do you think Amazon considers themselves?
A bookstore.
Wrong. They're a
No.
technology company,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Amazon's big, like one of the things that Amazon is best known for is the fact that they couldn't figure out somebody how to run their demand planning system in a way that would allow them to
Mhm.
to deliver this one day, same day delivery. So they built it themselves, right?
Mhm.
They are a technology company who is cutting jobs by using their technology, right? This is not the same as manufacturing in rural areas
Mm-hmm.
by any means. So I think that there's a piece of that we got to be realistic with. There's also a piece of this which is, look, do company is the fear that do companies set out and say we're going to cut headcount and that's the goal here because we've got things to do? Yeah, sure, right? Like private equity firms buy distressed organizations and they gut them
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they make them efficient and then they sell them. The same way somebody would buy a house, gut it, remodel it, and resell it.
Mm-hmm.
That happens too. And there are scenarios where new leadership comes in. And maybe it's not a private equity acquisition, but new leadership comes in and hello.
I don't know if you or me was lost in the cloud. So
I
sorry.
was lost. I was lost somewhere, but that
Well, absolutely, because it was you were talking shit about Amazon. So Jeff Bezos was like, beep. He's
turn
got
that
a
on.
big
Well,
red
there's an
button.
AI out there for that. That was never anybody's individual job. It's an AI that does it now. It's not a job that was lost. It was just a role that was created for software. But anyway, I simply say it from a perspective of there are purposes of headcount reduction and those types of things. Those are typically different cases. You
Mm-hmm.
don't usually spend a bunch of money on technology to cut headcount. It's usually we have a different problem,
Mm-hmm.
and if headcount reduction is a part of that problem, it's a different type of target. It's
Yeah.
it's a private equity firm acquiring a distressed company.
Mm-hmm.
It's new leadership coming in for a turnaround. Those types of things.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think unfortunately for just the overall conversation around emerging technologies, if you will, automation, AI, machine learning, predictive agents, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm.
there, is this just overall thread that is going to affect my job, especially in areas at which there might not be a lot of economic awareness around AI, right? When we see a new robot or something like that on the shop floor, we get a little bit nervous, even though I think a reality check, as you're saying, is still very much needed, right? So many, I would say most, manufacturing plants, humanoid robots are not something that we're seeing every single day, right? We're still seeing automation and machinery that's often behind cages, right? Because it's not safe to stand around or something like that, right? So there's a level at which we're still moving through that. But that is now on the organization to be able to understand and combat that fear. So that, like, we just talked to a business the other day that their overall business model is really too specific for ERP systems. So they were trying to ask us, like, what should we do, and all of these different pieces. And the challenge is they're like, we want to implement this with our forklift drivers, right? Not a position that's on a computer all day long or anything like that. I think we see that issue a lot of times within heavy manufacturing, is how are you going to take this very, this autonomous crane, right? And make sure that the people around it have a comfortability with it, that it still makes them productive and efficient.
Well, I mean, I still think that the human in the loop piece of this is important.
Mhm.
Let's let's put it in terms of reality. Like, if you think your job is, if you think AI is coming for your job, um, is your job really that insignificant that it can be replaced by AI? Right. So maybe we have a different type of problem. But maybe I'm a little grumpy about the topic today. The thought process that this is going to take things away. This is going to change things, and that's okay. But I still think that in person, human based reactions are really critical to the conversation. And the example that I have for you is go look up a picture of the Grand Canyon or some place that you have been that you were in an environment that struck you as something that you were appreciative of, just the space that you were in. It
Mm-hmm.
might not be an outdoor environment. It might be you stood inside of a manufacturing facility, and the smells and the sounds and everything else just had your senses turned to 11, and you were engrossed in that. Tell me that the picture or the video or shit, put on a meta headset and walk it 3D. Tell me that that's the same. It's not. It isn't. Why? Because there are a number of different senses that your brain is dependent on that give you so many different signals. And so you can't replace it. You can't replace all of those signals that the human body gets that you can take pictures of, you can create data from, and it will never be interpreted the same.
Mm-hmm. It most definitely won't be. I think the thing that I'm talking about, and maybe if you weren't so grumpy, you'd be able to understand that point is there has to be a balance in the organization. I'm not really worried about like what society will do with AI. I mean, I do think it's weird that our children who are 5 and 7 now often ask if videos are AI. And like that's part of their overall thought process and conversation, which is kind of crazy. But that's a whole another different situation. I think what we do in those conversations that we have within industry is talk about real life implementation, right? How
Mhm.
are you going to automate your forklifts if your forklift driver is like, hell no, right? I'm not standing next to this crazy robot and doing all of these different things. Does that employee just then exit the organization and then expensive for you to replace? Or what does that look like as far as making that bridge successful, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, dear forklift driver, get over yourself, right? Like at the end of the day, yeah, you can drive a forklift wherever you want. Go for it, right? I what I would encourage folks to do in their organization is look at who are the people that are going to be the future of your organization and invest in them. And as
Mhm.
we start to identify the people that are the future of your organization, look for people who are capable of being in the future today, right? The forklift driver that is afraid of some type of a technological tool. What do you think a forklift is? It's a technological tool. Are you afraid of the barcode scanner that you're using to scan out inventory and those types of things? What's going on here? What level of technology did you become fearful of this? Because your job is technological in nature. You drive a forklift. It's a highly specialized piece of equipment, right? So there's a lot to gain from having new things in that. But again, maybe I'm a little bit facetious about it today as it pertains to AI taking over jobs. I see it as something that is a far more fear-based reaction to something
Mhm.
that people don't understand than it is to some type of real threat.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the real threat, right, is to your organization. And so not knowing that that threat exists is going to be an issue, right? So when we do our readiness where we do kind of those users understanding pieces, we've got to know that that's there. right? Does that mean that one person, is in the break room talking shit about our new robot? No, right? That just means that we have to be aware of these things, and that anything that changes technology, policy, leadership is uncomfy for a minute, right? And
Mhm.
so being okay with the uncomfortable, I think, is the most high value practice you can have. The ability to say, and we can go and pivot, whether we need a new line of revenue, whether we're bringing on, a different acquisition in our business portfolio. That has to happen. But in order to do that, you got to understand what you're working with. I think from a macro level on the AI conversation, that's true, right? There's this misunderstanding around AI. And then from, the micro business level, that is also true, right? What does that actually mean to the organization? How do they avoid losing a ton of money, right? And that's what we're seeing, this kind of tug of war here. Leadership wants AI. Leadership wants AI. Why? Because the board and the investors are saying, we need AI. We need AI. So they go to the technology team. The technology team's like, okay, well, what are you looking for? Like, what type of AI? There's, many different types. This actually that we're using today, when you put in your expense reports and it pulls all of that in and then it flags your receipt. Yeah, that's AI right now. So we actually do use a ton of AI. What are you looking for? And that what we're not meeting those expectations. And that's where we get kind of lost in this area of confusion, and then bringing in outside third parties that profit off of that confusion, right? They come in and say, oh, no worries. I have the agent for you. I have the software for you. I have the change management for you, whatever, type of thing. And that's where business is really then 12 months down the road, you've paid 5 million for a new software that you have zero idea how much it costs, right? Because gone are the days of just licenses. We have seats, we have users, we have outputs, we have this hybrid pricing. Yeah, tokens. You took the word right out of my mouth. Tokens. And then now we also don't understand the disruption that we've caused in the organization. And we bought a new technology that didn't even fit what we needed, right? And then now we have a core critical function that's out in a bigger system that we put all of our budget in dollars into buying, a system that we don't understand, nor do we know how much it costs, and we can't implement it. So there's so much levels that AI has put around that confusion. And I think that's what people really experience from a day-to-day standpoint. I mean, that's what our clients experience all the time. They call us saying, IT and business can't work together. We're so confused. What should we be doing? Right.
Yeah, well, I think that what you have to remember here is that the growth that comes from all of these things is bound in discomfort, right? It's if you're going to remain comfortable, you're going to languish and you're going to shrink in your own comfort. The idea that we are not geared around facing discomfort and growing and that becoming an impetus for growth is just simply not reality, right? So the comfort, the discomfort that AI is causing is a good thing. Lean into that discomfort and understand it. Now, if you are using, and this is kind of an interesting dichotomy where you have one side which is, all right, we are going to lean into this discomfort and we are going to understand it and we are going to embrace it, and then we are going to hire what we need to be able to make us capable of confronting and succeeding and growing through this discomfort. That is far different than this shit's going to get hard and I don't think I can do it. So I'm going to spend a bunch of money hiring other people that are going to make it easy for me. You just failed the test and you're already headed down the drain because you got lazy and being able to confront the thought that discomfort leads to growth. You leaned into it and said, I need it to be easy and I'm going to throw money at it. And what will happen from that scenario where you're throwing money at it for the sheer sake of making it easier is a misnomer. It won't happen that way. you can throw money at something to be able to help you through your part of that discomfort so that you have new skill sets on board to confront it and grow through it. That's way different than trying to solve it with something that's supposed to make it easy. There are an abundance of scenarios in this throughout human history. You even hear the moniker, some of the greatest achievements in human history have come out of some of the darkest times in human history. And so, why did that happen? I was watching this thing about how the city of London burned to the ground. And then what did they do? They rebuilt the whole city, and it led to an age of prosperity for for the whole of the United Kingdom, right? This thought process that pain can't lead to growth is not acceptable in my opinion. And if you're looking for something easy, that's
Mhm.
where it is you're starting to really fail yourself
Mhm.
in your
Yeah.
own business by not looking at it and saying it's hard and that's an opportunity. And this maybe I've been listening to too much David Goggins recently, or and those types of things, but I do believe this. Your physical nature of your body is a great example of it, right? How do you get stronger? Not by sitting and hiring a machine to lift weights for you and watching it. You get underneath the dumbbells and you start pushing them up, right? You start lifting them, and then your body reacts to that by getting stronger. Your brain is the same way. How do you get smarter? You study, you think, and you try new things. And sometimes those new things lead to failure points, and those failure points lead to new lessons. And this
Mhm.
is how we're built. This is how human beings are built. This is how, frankly, AI is being built. So you could let AI make it easy for you, and then somebody will figure out that's when you get replaced by AI,
Mhm.
right? You let AI make everything easy for you,
Mhm.
which means that replacing you won't be hard.
Absolutely. I mean, maybe that's what like Birmingham City Council's attempting to do is burn the UK to the ground and use all of their money for their Oracle out of the box solution. So maybe
No,
they're trying
that's
to start.
Oracle doing the burning to the ground.
Well, I mean,
Their own new
technically,
opportunity.
I guess you'd have to ask, like, did SAP do the burning or did Oracle do the burning, or who is holding the torch on those two? Because I think there's probably burning on both sides there. But another
One of
classic
these, you'll never know.
well, I mean, another example though of trying to buy out of the box solutions,
Mhm.
even if it was a very shitty sales process, you got to know what you're buying. You're responsible for the software that you buy, right? Especially in public sector, right? Because that's not just customers, it's constituents, right? It's taxpayer money. So
Well, I
that's
think that this is so it's such an important thing, and maybe I'm again in the wrong mindset for this type of conversation. It's more meant to be thought leadership, and it's turning into more of something way different than that. But we look at the West, right? The future of technology and innovation in the West. How did the West become the West, right? People ventured out here into hardship, right? And they were rewarded for that. Some of them died. Yes, that was they took a risk. But as people migrated west in the United States seeking opportunity, they took chances and they took risks. And those are the types of spaces that these things can evolve, right? Taking a risk on learning AI isn't going to kill you. At least not today. Terminator hasn't happened yet. We've successfully postponed Judgment Day. But as we start to learn about this conversation in the West, the amount of space that we have, the amount of rural opportunities there are, and the ability to really balance things with life and technology, that seek that frontiersmanship, right? Look into what it is out there and go find something new. And that's where I think that there's so much growth to come from those spaces that are unknown. And that's what I think is when you talk about the future of innovation and technology in the West. That's where this really starts to come back to full circle on the conversation, which is go seek the opportunities in the spaces where they don't exist yet. The same way people started doing that in the 1800s here in the United States, seeking opportunities where they didn't exist yet. You could draw that back way back to people leaving the old world for the new world and seeking the opportunities that didn't exist yet and looking for those things that can be defined by you, and go and do it. Go and give it a shot. And if you stub your toe or face plant, get up, learn from it, man. This is where it gets fun. This is where the real fulfillment comes from. And so when we start looking at the future in technology and innovation in rural areas in the West, whatever it is you want to characterize it as, the fulfillment will come from seeking it. And maybe you don't find what you set out to find in the first place, but I promise you, you will find some sense of fulfillment because you went for it. You challenge yourself to do it, and your body grew from that. Your brain grew from that. Your sense of fulfillment grew from that. And that's, I don't know, maybe pontificating, maybe a little bit philosophical in nature, but I think that this is all important though, especially in the age of AI.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it is important. I think a lot of people, though, feel as though they are in the passenger seat and not the driver's seat, especially with modern technology implementations. Is they're on the roadmap of another business that they don't understand. And when that's not communicated effectively, then we have these pockets of misunderstanding and confusion
Mhm.
that fill with our intrusive thoughts, right? As human beings or teams. And so I think there's a level of which, yeah, yes, lean into the uncomfortable, do the hard work, do the understanding. But there has to be a level of where the leadership tells them where they're going in the passenger seat. Where are we
It
driving?
depends, right? If you're waiting on leadership to tell you where you're going, that's fine. If that's for you, then that's fine. There are lots of things that we think about that are taking somebody else's lead. Very